Sherele Moody is an award-winning journalist, femicide researcher and anti-violence campaigner with 28 years' experience covering crime, courts and social justice. She's finally gotten around to podcasting, and I'm so glad she has. Her show is called She Matters. You can find it now wherever you get your podcasts, or you can use the link in the show notes to this episode. Sherele joins us on Australian True Crime to tell us what we can expect from this show. This is Australian True Crime. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast is created, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. And a warning, this episode of the podcast contains graphic descriptions of violence.
Well, actually, the podcast is based on my She Matters project, which is basically where I post about women killed, about them. So where possible, I share their names and their faces, and I tell you a little bit about them. And usually those posts follow in the immediate days or weeks after their death. And that project was designed as a kickback against really dodgy media reporting in Australia, where victims tend to be erased, victim blamed, slut shamed, that kind of stuff, where the perpetrator is put on a pedestal and we know all about his achievements, but we actually don't know about her. She becomes an afterthought in stories about her own murders. So I wanted to take She Matters even broader than that. So I have started writing quite in-depth social media posts about women killed, where I work with the families to choose 15 to 20 photographs of the women during their lives. And I work with them to tell their stories. And so I've been doing that for about a year. And this is the oral version of that, because clearly social media is great, but actually hearing the story from the people who loved the women and girls most is, the ultimate. You can't get better than that.
Yeah, I agree. And hearing you say that and talk about the way women are described in media, it makes me think about even when it seems not problematic, but when they describe women as single mum, found dead, mother of 4, found dead. Like, even then it's reductive, isn't it? It's just like that's someone's whole identity.
Yeah, women are always defined by their relationships to other people. Always. It's almost impossible. And if she's single, if she doesn't have a relationship to anyone, if they can't find a relationship, she becomes a single woman. Do you know what I mean? In the reporting, she's not necessarily like the first thing we see in a headline or first paragraph, the mother of one, the grandmother, the sister. We don't hear the psychologist, the leading doctor.
So right.
The relationships in our lives are, of course, incredibly important, and we are incredibly important to the people who love us. That there's no doubt about that. But we're individuals, we're unique, and our relationships very rarely define us. They are a part of what makes us important, but they are not what defines us.
Yeah, it does seem like it's just extra terrible if she was a mum of 4.
Yeah.
And things like that, isn't it? There's like gradients of terribleness when crime is committed against women, depending on their circumstances.
100%. It's almost as though people or journalists, when they're writing about or, telling stories of women killed, that they need to kind of let us know that relationship so that we have empathy for her, or perhaps for the people that she leaves behind. We should have empathy for her regardless of her relationships or lack thereof.
Tell us why you've described this as not a true crime podcast, because it sounds at the moment pretty true crimey.
Yeah, look, when you listen to it, you realise what I'm talking about. I mean, clearly, this is a podcast about femicide. It's a podcast about the erasure of women and girls as a result of violence. So we can't get away from the crime aspect. That's always going to be a part of their story and the stories that I tell. But the crime part is an aspect of her story. It's not the be-all and end-all of who she is or who she was. So like the relationships, there was more to this person than just the way in which she died. But also it's about examining the impact of that moment that a person chose to end her life. It's about examining the impact of that on the people who loved her, on her family, her friends, her community. So it's about, this is who she is. These are the memories that are really important to us. This is what's happened. This is the grief or the stages that I went through to cope with it. This is her legacy, and this is what I hope you get from her story.
Yeah, I know that our listeners at the Australian True Crime community will like your podcast because we have always tried to get to know a victim of crime, but that's your whole remit here, which is, I think, fantastic. You get to depths and you get to places that we just don't have time to on our show, but you've made a whole show of that, which I think is ingenious and wonderful. And it gives the family, it gives the loved ones and people in the woman's life an opportunity I bet they don't get very often to just sit down and talk about her.
Yeah, so basically I give them a draft list of questions, but when we get in that studio, I say to them, this is your story. This is her narrative. You control her narrative in the studio. You control what other people are going to hear. So let's start at the top and we'll go off that. We'll probably not even ask most of these questions because I'm going to be guided by you and what you want to say. And it is, look, I can't even tell you what it's been like to be in the studio. Just the conversations, the tears that have flowed, the laughs that have been had, the incredible intimacies that the families have shared with me. Yeah, there's just no words for that. I wish I could describe it.
No, I hear what you're saying. And I think, again, a lot of our listeners will, because we feel like we've been, in that zone with people, but we haven't had as long with them as you have. And also, dare I say, we haven't had a relationship with them that you have because you have such a long history of advocacy and work in the space of women's safety. So I'm sure there's a deep feeling of safety when these families come to speak to you.
Yeah, so my whole ethos is making sure that the families are looked after and the friends are looked after. So it's, it's being very open about the process from the start to the finish. So, this is what we're going to talk about. I give them the episodes to sign off on, follow up on them to make sure that they're good the next day or the hours afterwards. But a lot of these people I've worked with for significant time. Some of the people are new. Some of them I've worked with very intensely. So there's a couple of families here, particularly the opening episode, Kelly Williams.
As he walked by, a man heard the violence behind the wall. He didn't help her. Her sister found the single mum days later. The smell of her favourite human decaying forever lingers in her memory. Her murder warranted no more than 3 lines in one newspaper. Her killer still walks among us. Her name is Kelly Williams. She was only 31. You've never heard of her, but it's not for want of trying. Kelly's sister Paula has spent the past 23 years trying to get journalists to tell her story.
She was my big sister, so she was my idol, my everything.
I mean, oh my gosh, the efforts that her family has gone to get her story told over 23 years and the amount of knockbacks, the amount of rejections they've had. They're trying to get an inquest open and they're trying to get a reward for information leading to her death. And so that means a lot of work, me working very closely with them to make that happen.
What can you tell us about that story? Why are her family concerned that people will forget about her?
So I got a message about 6 months ago from a woman called Paula Duffy who lives in a little town outside of Melbourne. And in that message, you could hear the desperation behind her pleas for help. She was telling me of all the people that she'd reached out, the government ministers, the police minister, the homicide squad, and everyone. Anyway, the basic story is her sister, Kelly Williams, was murdered 2004 in Hawthorne here in Victoria. Her very short-term lover and friend was charged with her murder. He was acquitted at trial by a jury, and that's it. That's the end of the story. That's the investigation into Kelly's death stopped. There was only ever one 3-sentence paragraph story written about Kelly, which was basically single mother found dead in Hawthorne. The journalist never attended any of the trial, any of the hearings. So essentially, Kelly Williams didn't exist except for those who loved her.
Tell me why you think that is. Why has Erin Patterson's trial become this huge media sensation where journalists had to enter a lottery system to even make it into the courtroom because there were so many journalists from all over the world who didn't want to miss a second of that trial?
We start with news from Australia, where Erin Patterson, who came to be known as the Mushroom Killer, has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years behind bars. She was found guilty of killing 3 relatives and trying to kill another at a family lunch in 2023, where she served beef Wellington laced with toxic mushrooms.
What's the difference? Why does that happen for this case? Why does nobody care about a 31-year-old woman called Kelly Williams who's murdered?
No one cared about Kelly Williams because she was a single mum. She was battling a drug addiction. She was in the coming off the drug stage. She was seen as the wrong type of woman. She had a lot of associates who would come to her house for various reasons, and she was painted as a slut by the defence. She was painted in all the bad lights. She was just another woman. That was it. She was just another woman that no one cared about. She wasn't pretty enough. She wasn't prominent enough. The crime against her wasn't gruesome enough.
And by contrast, and I am not taking anything away from Erin Patterson's victims, but by contrast, we have these beautiful, elderly, deeply Christian people. So in a way, do you think our culture is holding Kelly in some way culpable for her own murder because of her lifestyle?
Absolutely. And I'm going to come to that, but I'm just going to go back to Erin Patterson. The coverage of Erin Patterson was never about her victims.
No, that's true.
It was about Erin Patterson, the way in which she murdered the 3 people, the fact that she's a female mass killer. That's what that was about. The obsession was with her. If you have a look at the media coverage from woe to go, the victims were very rarely platformed. There was really not much in-depth examination of their lives. And indeed, in some of the reporting around the trial, their names were never even mentioned.
Sherele, you've just completely blown my mind because
Sorry.
I appreciate it because, yes, because she's a woman, it never entered my mind that the story was about her and not about the victims.
That's why everyone can say her name.
Yes.
That's why everyone can say her name and they cannot say her victims' names. It was always about Erin Patterson and the fact that she's a female mass killer, which is exceedingly rare. Yeah, it just had all the hallmarks of a really crappy daytime movie.
Okay, I'll give you another example. We recently spoke to Tracy Connolly's sister.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I remember Tracy.
Yeah, of course you and I do. But Tracy was murdered a year after Jill Meagher was murdered. And Jill's husband, Tom, was the first person to say in the media, why aren't we focusing more on this young woman's murder? She was 40 years old. It remains unsolved. But, even in the beginning, police were saying, it's baffling, it's baffling. Now, we know the reason why is that Tracy was a sex worker and she was living and working out of a van in Grieve Street. I mean, at what point do we in this enlightened society we live in the penny's only just dropped in my head about Erin Patterson, so I'm not putting myself ahead of anyone else here. At what point does the penny drop for us that it doesn't matter? It shouldn't matter what the kind of person is. Everyone deserves the same level of respect.
I don't know that penny is ever going to drop, especially in mainstream media, especially while mainstream media focus on, the perfect victim or the iconic murderer or something like that. While they can get headlines and subscriptions out of those victims, they'll keep on doing what they do. The thing is that you and I are part of a revolution against that. So by doing podcasts, by using social media, by presenting the stories of women lost in ways that kick back against the norm, we kind of break down a lot of that. We push against it, and we say to people, you know, it's really important to recognize that every human is valid and every one of their stories is valid, whether they're homeless, they're sex workers, or they're the richest woman in the country. We are basically putting them onto an even keel.
If you'd like to talk to someone about abuse that's taken place in your life, no matter how long ago it happened, your GP is always a good place to start. If that's not going to work for you, you can contact 1800-RESPECT on 1800-737-732 or via their website 1800respect.org.au. Or you can call Lifeline's 24-hour phone counselling service on 13 11 14. Episode 2 of your new podcast, you're talking about the death of a baby. I mean, again, it's hard to believe that as a culture we can ever stop advocating for the death of a baby to be solved and for someone to be convicted of a crime like that.
Talon Hare is an 8.5-month-old baby who was killed, it'll be about 7 years ago now. So there were only 2 people in the house and her mum has been cleared of the murder. The police have been investigating the other person for all of this time. So the police no doubt are doing the job that they need to do. But Talon's family, Talon's mum Kayla, has been in limbo for all of these years. Up until this week, she didn't have a death certificate, so we finally got that sorted. We requested an inquest from the Victorian government, from the coroner's court, and that's been refused. We asked for Kayla to meet with the Minister for Women and Domestic Violence to discuss Talon's case. That's been refused. So she's just getting knockbacks the entire time. The interesting thing about Talon's death is when she died, the homicide squad took courage of her death very shortly after her, in fact, while she was critically injured, and child protection was also involved. But they never put a media release out about her death, so the media didn't know about it. And you can't write about what you didn't know. So that's one of the reasons why Talon's death, I guess, has flown under the radar. But again, even getting media to write about Talon now has been near impossible. I think we've managed maybe 3 articles in the 6 or so months that I've been working with Kayla to get that inquest and to get, a reward for information leading to the case being solved.
Even though I kept trying to convince myself while she was coming, they'd removed the tubes and her heart was stopping, I was still convinced somehow she would be okay. Even if she was anything but dead, would have been better. Her on life support for life with high needs would have been better than this. Anything, it's just, I still can't believe that she's gone now.
Again, it's a case that they just don't care.
Yeah. I guess it's difficult without a conviction, but surely there is nothing more in the public interest than knowing that a person is capable of killing a baby.
But to be fair, the media are actually in a prime position to write about Talon's case right now until that person is charged.
Yeah, right.
It's basically a free-all. They just have to be careful of defamation issues. They don't have to, it's not a sub judice / contempt issue. It only becomes that issue when he's charged. So this is a very good story. It's a very good story, and it's a very distressing and disturbing case. And the fact that we can't get media traction on this boggles my mind. But again, I think it's because, Talon's family are working class. Her mum doesn't fit a certain profile. Talon doesn't fit a certain profile, and the case is 7 years old now, and they just don't care.
Until something else happens, and then they realise that the offender was also in the frame for a previous offence, and then suddenly it's a huge story, right?
Yeah, we have reached out to investigative journalists to pick it up, but they're just not interested. So we just keep plugging away on it. We have Kayla, Talon's mum, has got social media pages where she writes about Talon just about every day, sort of trying to bring little snippets of her very short life to people. We push that petition and we just keep on trying to find a way to platform Talon's story the best we can until we get what Talon's family needs.
Now, in the case of Holly Ann Davidson, another woman whose story you're going to be highlighting, there was a time when you couldn't report her name, certainly. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. So there was a suppression order on her name and the name of the man connected to her death, and that was in place since she died. Her name was suppressed by the coroner's court up in the Northern Territory.
Why?
It's unknown why, but Holly's mum, Paula, fought very hard, and very recently the coroner's court lifted that suppression. So now we can say her name, and her name is Holly Ann Davidson. Now, she was a police officer. The police force was her life. She had one child, and she was in a relationship with a police officer who was significantly older and had a very clear level of authoritative power over her at points during her career. The Northern Territory Police knew that he was abusing her. They knew there was ongoing domestic violence, and they did nothing. So there were at least 21 reports of domestic violence to the police, or that the police were aware of. Nothing was done. And then something happened to Holly at home, and 4 days later she died in hospital from a critical head injury. The police officer / partner was charged with failure to rescue, which is a very minor charge and a very strange charge. I very rarely heard of that. And they dropped it. They dropped the charge, and he is still a police officer. It's incredible, isn't it?
It really is. But that's a lot of your work over the years has made me feel like that's incredible. Stories that you've told us in lots of different ways are incredible, ridiculous. I mean, the fact that the mural that you have in the city in Melbourne is attacked and defaced on a regular basis is incredible. Can you tell us about that, about the mural, about the opposition? How could there possibly be opposition to such a thing? But tell us what's going on with that.
Yeah, so the mural's been up there since International Women's Day of this year, so March 8. The intention is to keep it there till March 8 of next year. When I installed it, I had 116 victims on it. Today, it's got 151, but in the next couple of days, 152 will be added, because that's how many women we've lost since January 1, 2024. So it's an ongoing project. I'm adding to it all the time, updating as needed. Yeah, so it's actually, if you go down and have a look at it, you'll see that it has She Matters all over it. So the mural is made up of the She Matters cards from last year and from this year. So the cards that I use for every She Matters post when a woman is killed. And it's had a fair bit of graffitiing, but at one point some dickhead went down and erased almost all of it and wrote "War on Men" right across it. So it had to be reinstalled. Since then, I've put graffiti protection paint on it, and I've been able to erase any damage using a bit of water and a cloth. And so I've managed to, keep it in pretty good condition. So it's in Hosier Lane in Melbourne. One of the interesting things about the mural is standing there listening to the conversations, and it is a real conversation piece. People stop and they have a chat about violence. They have a chat about the demographics of women killed, which is basically every woman killed. You can see that from the cards. One of the things that drives me a little bit crazy is watching the tour guides explaining the mural. Now, none of these people have ever asked me what it's about, even though I'm down there all the time and they see me all the time. they will pronounce to everyone who's in their tour, this is a mural of domestic violence. And each time they do that, I want to hit the wall with my head, because people don't understand that women die in multiple contexts. Yes, domestic and family violence is the key context for femicide in Australia, but people don't understand that around 30% of victims are killed by people they know who are not relatives. So maybe their colleague or their boss or the neighbour. And we lose around 10% of women to stranger violence. The most common denominator there is that 90% of the women in that wall were killed by men known to them. So either partners, former partners, family members, or associates. It just blows my mind that people don't ask the right questions about the mural, and that people give wrong information about it, and that people, even outside of the talking about the mural, don't actually understand what violence against women really does look like here in Australia, and who the victims are and who the perpetrators are.
This is what frustrates me about the disconnect between the amount of attention we give. I want to say we do give the issue. We talk endlessly, it seems to me, unless you and I are the only ones talking about it, but I don't think we are, about, an Australian woman a week is murdered. We know that. The police, the governments, everyone's forever releasing statements and strategies and plans. And not only does it not affect the numbers in a positive way, but also it doesn't seem to actually get the messages that you're talking about through. There are still so many misconceptions about violence against women in Australia.
I think that there's a lot of people who have their head in the sand. They simply don't want to know. They don't care to know. So one day I was down at the mural and I saw two women looking at it, and one woman says to the other woman, I don't know why they're bothering. It's inevitable. Violence is inevitable. We can't stop it. And, that for me is that encapsulates, I think, about how a lot of people think. They think that violence can't be stopped, and yet it is the most preventable epidemic we face. Of course it can be stopped, because it is a person making a decision to be violent. Every death I document, every death has failures before the woman died, during the legal process, and after the legal process. There are failures along the line. There are moments in her life where she could have been saved had the right decisions been made, the right people listened to her, all of these things. And so if you can track where those things are happening, the holes in the safety net, if you can track them and you can find a pattern, you can fix that. So violence is very much preventable. And a simple example is a woman can go into a police station, say in Preston, in Melbourne, just pulling that out of my head, and say, look, I'm scared that the guy next door is stalking me. He's threatened me. I think he's going to kill me. And the police officer that she talks to can say, hey, let's sit down and get you some help. That same woman with the same story can go to, say, a police station in Logan in Queensland, just off the top of my head, with the same issue, and they will say, come back when it's violent, or we can't do anything about that. Move. Do you know what I mean? That is just one example of a failure.
Let's talk about the mental health system while we're talking about systems that can let us down here in Australia. And as I always say about these issues, these are matters of funding oftentimes, and these are things that we actually have control of when it comes time to vote for people. If we talk about the case of Courtney Heron, young woman who was murdered in a park in Melbourne, and her assailant was a man with significant mental health issues.
Yeah, 100%. And there was a couple of big failures there. The first failure was the court letting him out. So the court gave him probation or parole after he had been jailed for strangling a woman, his former female partner. The court based that decision on his parents' commitment to make sure he received the mental health care that he needed. It was based on that decision. He was released, and that commitment was never followed through, and it was never communicated with authorities. So the parents didn't do what they had agreed with the court to do, but they didn't tell authorities that they weren't doing it. So they didn't say he was in care, that he was getting what he needed. And not long after that, it was 3 weeks, I believe 3 weeks after he was let out of prison, Courtney ran into him on a tram. And, within hours, he had murdered her. And post her death, there was a huge focus in the media on her life, the lifestyle she led, or, what she was, the fact that she was considered homeless, that she had substance use problems, all that sort of stuff.
Courtney had been couch surfing and sleeping rough. Detectives are trying to determine if she was even residing here at Royal Park.
I remember one headline saying, the Daily Mail, the accused killer with the model looks. The media were focusing on how good looking he was in earlier photographs of him.
Yeah.
And really zoned in on the mental health. So Courtney became victim blamed. She was very much victim blamed for her own death. And he, had quite a different lens on him.
Absolutely. At the very least, initially it was reported as sort of a kerfuffle between two homeless people in the park, wasn't it?
Yeah. And look, Courtney wasn't homeless. She had somewhere to stay. So I've interviewed her mum, Maxie, and her baby sister, Sian. Sian's only 17. She was quite young. She was in primary school when Courtney died. This is the first time that Maxie and Sian have spoken publicly, and to hear them tell Courtney's story, because they were exceedingly close to her, to hear them tell Courtney's story, they were brutally honest about the things that were happening in Courtney's life and about the incredible moments that they shared with her. So, there was some stuff that, Courtney had some dark days there, but, she wasn't defined by that. She was an incredibly funny and generous person, kind, very smart, and there were just things that we never knew about her from the media reporting, and things that you'll hear about her that no one has ever spoken about publicly.
She was just 25 years of age when she died. You're making me think about, and I guess I want to invite everyone in this conversation to think about how you and your life could be reduced if someone chose to. Because thinking about Courtney Heron's life, I'm thinking, God, when I was 25, I could have been described as lots of things.
Oh my gosh, yes.
None of them very positive, you know what I mean? So even now I think, well, I'm a single mum, living in rental accommodation. I'm just trying to think about how easy it is to reduce you and me and Courtney and anybody to a not very flattering picture, or a not very... all of these things are normal that I'm saying about myself. I know there's nothing extraordinary about them, but I also know how they're not very flattering, or they don't sum me up.
No. The stuff that people think is negative is what the media are going to write on. And I just want to bring up one other interview that I did. Kobe Parfait, who was killed by her friend, a woman, Shannon Jeffrey, in Ballarat, Victoria in 2020. The only photo the media ever published of Kobe was a mugshot that the police supplied to them. They actually could have reached out to Kobe's mum, and she would have given them different photographs. She would have given different photographs. Instead, what the media did was treated her family like a circus. So they would stalk Kobe's mum at her work. So she worked at a supermarket. They would actually camp out the front waiting for Kathy to leave the supermarket. They were bombarding Kobe's kids and her family with DMs through social media. They all had to basically turn their social media off or make fake profiles. At one stage, Kathy and her family left the court and they didn't want to make a comment, and the media chased them down the street like they were common criminals, like they'd chase rapists down the street leaving the court. The way that Kobe was presented, she was basically dehumanized, and the way that the media treated her family is probably amongst some of the worst treatment I've seen in all of the deaths I've documented, and I've documented more than 2,500. So, that's a pretty bad situation. But I really just incredible to know that Kathy and Kobe's sister Pip were able to go, we had this really shit time with the media, but we're going to trust this person so we can tell the world about Kobe Parfait.
I just look at, if you Google Kobe's name, the headlines are Ballarat mother, dumped, dumped Kobe Parfait. I mean, to describe a human being as dumped.
Oh my gosh, I am so over it. As we know, every time a woman is killed and her body is put in a wheelie bin, we fucking know about it because she becomes the wheelie bin murder every time.
Now, am I right in assuming that you, on your show, you don't go into a lot of detail about the actual crime?
Only if the family goes there. So if the family talks about it, that's them. I won't stop them. But for me, I don't describe the crime to them. I will ask them a question, and if they go there, they go there, and if they don't, they don't. And, people do want to talk about what happened or the context or what they know. Definitely in the case of Kobe Parfait, I sat down with Kathy and Pip. The interview started with Kathy, and she went from the moment Kobe disappeared to the moment that they were getting documents from the coroner's court after Kobe's body being found. So around the first 45 minutes, she just went through everything. It was a very in-depth discussion around the crime. And that was her choice. That was absolutely, this is what she wanted to tell me, and that is what she told me.
And sometimes people do want us to bear witness to what's happened, and I accept that, and I'm willing to do that if that's what the family or, somebody needs. It's difficult for families often to be able to just sit and talk about the person they've lost for lots of reasons. Firstly, we're always, our culture is a bit queasy about death. And secondly, when the death is violent, people don't know what to say. And I've had a lot of people tell me that they've seen old friends cross the street rather than run into them and things like that.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very isolating experience. And for that reason, they oftentimes are just kind of really looking for an opportunity to sit down with someone and get it all out, the good and the bad. And, people, sometimes listeners think, oh, how could you relive that? But it's important, isn't it, to process it somehow?
Absolutely. It's important to navigate your own feelings with other people and navigate that trauma. But the most important part for everyone that I speak to is really just about telling that story. Just saying, please don't forget her. This is the most important person to me. Please don't forget her. Please hear her story.
Wow, that's powerful. It's so good. It's like, in the true crime space environment, of course, there's a lot going on all the time. But I really think this is new, and this is a different, very important space that you have. You didn't even find it. This is what you've always done, and I'm so glad you're doing it on a podcast now. It's fantastic, and I hope you do it for a long, long time.
Yeah, I hope so too. Hopefully. Supposed to be meeting with a potential sponsor tomorrow, so I'm hoping we can nail down a deal and it will, sort of solidify it for a year. But I'm committed to it for 12 months regardless. So
that's a really good point you make. Podcasts don't come together for free, and there's been this thing. This is a little bit behind the curtain for our listeners. That there's been this thing for years in Australia that sponsors didn't want to be associated with crime, even though true crime's like the biggest genre of podcasts that there is, got the most listeners. But a lot of corporates were worried about being associated with crimes. I think that changed with Teacher's Pet when Harvey Norman came on so loud and proud. And, for any potential sponsors, I just want you to know that we got a lot of ears, and when it's done right, like Sherele is doing it right, I think it's a really valuable service that you're doing, and our listeners would be appreciative of sponsors' help.
I mean, I thought about doing this podcast about a year and a half ago, and it's been sitting in my head for all that time, and I didn't know how I was going to do it. But I have to say, having listened to the first 5 or 6 episodes, I think it is the best work I've ever done. So I just am so incredibly proud of it. And the reason it's the best work I've ever done is because the people that I've spoken to have been so incredibly honest with their emotions and with their stories, and they are the reason that it's an amazing piece of work. And I hope that a lot of people come to it and listen and learn and take away a lot of things.
Thank you to our guest, Sherele Moody. Sherele's podcast, She Matters, is available now wherever you get your podcasts, or you can use the link in the show notes to this episode. If you need support after listening to this podcast, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14 or contact 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737 732 or 1800respect.org.au. Indigenous Australians can contact 13 Yarn on 13 92 76 or 13yarn.org.au.
The producers of this podcast recognise the traditional owners of the land on which it's recorded. They pay respect to the Aboriginal elders past, present and those emerging.